supporting local art. Way back when, I started Art Hop because I wanted local artists to be able to show their work and have an opportunity to show their work. And I think Takoma ARTery is an extension of this idea that, you know, me along with Roz Grigsby started a long time ago when she was working for Main Street Takoma. So I want to support local art. I think it's really important. I think it's really important to see what your mailman does, see what your FedEx driver makes, you know, see what people, because we're all artists and we all process the world through images and words and, you know, music, and you know, we're alive because of that, and we're better off because of the art in the world. So I think it's really important.
I just joined as you know, part of the show because my work had been selected as part of the show, and I look forward to get to know the other artists and to collaborate with them to get our work to get better and to get it seen and viewed. Yeah.
I joined I think 2 years ago because it's an artists group, and there's a lot of diverse artists. And I think it's wonderful that, you know, they put together shows like this to let people see how much diverse talent there is here in Takoma Park.
So when I was a little kid, my dad had a film camera and the equipment to process, like have a little dark room in the bathroom of our house. So even as a little kid, I knew how photography worked. And I just stayed marginally interested, but I didn't really start doing photography myself until my early 20s. My grandfather passed away, and someone gave me one of his old cameras. So I got a manual and a couple of books and started learning how to work the camera. And I lived in Blacksburg, Virginia at the time, which is in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And so you could just take a drive through the mountains and find the most beautiful things to photograph. So that's how I got started. And eventually I decided I would like to also get paid for it, which usually means photographing people. So I went to photography school, took a 2-year course just to brush up on all my skills and get some professional certification so that I could start a business.
I just always liked to do crayon drawings on manila paper. I remember doing one of my family in a canoe, and I did one when I was in like first grade. We went to New York City, and I was from a small town in Michigan, and it was like miraculous. And I drew a picture of all the taxi cabs and the windows with the flower pots in the window. And I look at it now. My mother saved them all. And I look at it now, and I can actually remember the feeling of making those drawings. And I don't have a good memory of my childhood, but I do remember making drawings. So obviously there was something from an early age that I loved to draw.
Oh, I started doing art forever ago, when I was a kid. And did artwork seriously up until I was in about my 30s, and then gave it up because I needed to earn a living. And I recently retired from running a business here in Takoma Park 3 years ago, and now I've gone back to doing artwork full-time.
I started during COVID when I also retired from my regular job. But I've always loved the visual arts, and I've always doodled a lot when, you know, along boring meetings.
I was a dumpster diver early on. I would pull anything I thought could make something out of the trash or save it. I remember making mud pies and making beautiful little sculptures out of mud early on, but I've always made art, yeah. I've always been very consciously keeping my hands busy, yeah.
I use natural materials. I do assemblage work. I collect furniture that I deconstruct, building materials, especially when people are renovating houses and they tear out all of that beautiful woodwork, or sometimes from fire. I've got a lot of pieces that were burnt, And then I use natural materials that I collect here, seed pods, acorn pods, vines, rusted metal, rusted tools, and I do creation stories with these things.
So I started out mostly with collages, so using papers from photography books that, you know, like library used book sales and things like that. But I also started to take classes in, you know, drawing and acrylics and watercolors, all sorts of exploring various media. I probably have not found my style yet, although I feel like my collages have their own style that can be identified, and they all have a little bit of a narrative to them, and they have a unity of color and textures. But when it comes to paintings or drawings, I'm just learning at this stage.
I've graduated to collage. Early on, I was a painter. I was a mixed media artist, and I'm still a mixed media artist, but I primarily focus on hand painting my papers and then creating collages out of it, which is what my rock altars that are part of the show right now, they're mixed media collage art.
I love doing documentary photography. I like portraits too, but it's really fun to be just in an active moment and try to make great photos when you can't tell people what to do or where to be, where you have to move yourself and make it all work. I've been a full-time photographer for over 20 years. I photograph families and children mainly. So during the pandemic, when everything shut down, so did my work. And I quickly realized I needed some other kind of creative outlet that didn't rely on other people. So I initially started doing some collage just at home on the ottoman in my living room. I did a lot of collage, and then I started kind of trying to paint. And I got this urge to understand abstract painting. I didn't know what to make of it. I'd never really studied it. So I took a painting course. It was like a 12-week online course, and by the end of it, I had started to create a series of paintings, a body of work, had kind of started coming to the colors and the shapes that I like to create. It was during the forced sabbatical of the pandemic that I started painting.
I always took drawing classes because when I was in college, I wanted to be an art major, and I took a painting class my first semester, and the teacher was not at all encouraging. And so I gave up that idea, and I didn't paint for like another 30 years. I would draw, but I didn't pick up a paintbrush until I lost my job. And then I started thinking about painting, and then during COVID, I took an online course on using acrylics. So now I mainly do acrylics and watercolors. I think I just got to the point where I thought, you know, I'm 50 years old. Who cares if I do a horrible painting? I can do any kind of painting I want to. So I think that's what did it. I still do watercolor, mainly florals. I love to do watercolor flowers because to me flowers are infinitely interesting. I mean, you think you've seen every possible way that a leaf can attach to a stem, and then you see a new plant that has a different way, and it just, I find that fascinating.
I want to communicate how amazing nature is. So you've got the beginning cycles, birth, and then the different stages of life, and how amazing they all are, and how important they are, and how interconnected they are. So in youth there is a beauty, and in old age there is a beauty. Same with nature, there are cycles, spring, summer, winter, fall, and they're all important and all connected together. For example, like echinacea, it blooms, it's beautiful, and then in the fall you've got this gorgeous seed pod, and I use a lot of echinacea seed pods, but birds use that for food, and if you leave the stems intact, bees come in and lay their eggs in the stems, and then they've got a home for when they come back in the spring. So, you know, taking care of nature is so important, and that's part of what I strive to show in my work. You know, sometimes I just look at stuff for days or hours, then all of a sudden it all comes together. And I love looking into something and looking for the story that that particular little seed has or that piece of wood has. You know, sometimes a piece of wood that's been burned, you look at it and the paint peels off and there's a whole story in there. There's a whole landscape within that little thing, and you don't have to do a lot to bring the story out.
It's a way to explore my creativity and trying to connect. You know, I feel like when you get to it at an older stage in life, you have all this lived experience, and it's a way to bring things together that are kind of, you know, in these layers inside me. I think what the thing that probably has changed the most is that the way I now look at art. It really has changed my pleasure and my understanding of works of art that other people create. I feel is much deeper, and I just enjoy so much more. And I also, I feel like my brain has changed because I look at things and or I close my eyes sometimes and I start seeing all these images and colors and shapes. And yeah, it's almost like I developed a new sense.
So I started doing the rock altars, which are the rock stacks. It was at the height of the pandemic, and I was very frustrated before that because I wasn't painting. And how I process the world is by painting and painting papers and creating collage. And I wasn't doing it. I felt very paralyzed by everything that was going on during the pandemic. I had a son in Canada who couldn't get home, and I had another son that was in high school, and you know, he was a freshman and losing his mind because he was doing online classes. So I was pretty frustrated, and I kept digging up garden beds in my backyard and pulling out rocks. And the rocks started stacking up all around my fire pit, and one day I decided I'm going to paint these rocks. And of course, you know, I'm not going to paint realistic rocks. I had to paint papers and then make them look like rocks and do everything. And really what it's done for me is it's created a dialogue with me and the world, and creating a discussion, if you will. It helped me process the pandemic. It helped me process my kids, you know, going through their struggles. And I started researching, and you know, we have cairns and we have inukshuks, and you know, rock stacks are one of the most ancient, primitive ways that we've communicated with each other. And I was like, this is my story. I want to tell it. And for me, I purposely make the rock stacks impossible because I want you to see the possibilities in the impossible. So the rock stacks aren't quite, you know, what you could do in real life, but they're there. They're there. I give them highlights and shadows, so it gives weights to these pieces of paper to make it look three-dimensional. And for me, what it does is it tells a story of hope, because you step back from it. At first, you're like, that's impossible. It can't happen. But then when you step back from it, you say, wait, it could be possible. And that's really important to me. I want you to see the impossibilities so that you get to the place of possible. Because for me, the connections, the way that the rocks touch each other, the spaces in between are what give us hope. That's where hope comes from, is our connections to our community, to people, to whatever. So that's why I keep doing the rock series.
When I first started painting, when I was taking classes, it was mainly still lifes, florals, and I still love flowers. Have to be one of my favorite subjects. But more recently, since COVID, I took a class and started doing more abstract work, which I really love because it's playing with shapes and colors, and it's a little bit more intuitive, and in a way it's meditative. Because I've tried meditating, I'm not good at that, but when I'm painting, I can become very focused and very centered. Well, in a way, it's like when you have a mantra, and the idea of the mantra is that it occupies a certain part of your brain so that you can relax. And I think with painting, I mean, I'm so focused on colors and shapes and how this relates to that, that everything else, you know, all my worries, you can't be worrying about something if you're really involved in painting. So to me, I think that's why it becomes kind of meditative. That's one of the reasons I love it.
Partly, I feel calm. I have a studio space, so to be able to go in the studio and kind of close the door on all of the other responsibilities of life has kind of Zen effect. You can get in your zone. But I also mostly feel curious when I'm making a painting. I'll work for a little while, and then I'll stop and step back, kind of think about it. Sometimes I'll make another painting based on something interesting in the first one, and then come back and work on the first one. I usually work on several paintings at once. So yeah, a lot of just being able to follow my curiosity, and I think that's probably what keeps me at it. So sometimes you have like a lot of ideas, you're feeling very creative, and you put some paint on, and then you need to let it dry, or you need to think about it a little. So if you have several paintings going at once, you're still in the zone, so you just move to the next painting, and then you can come back.
What do I see in the future? Making more art. I think I'm going to stick with the rock altars for a little while, but I am also I carve a lot of linoleum blocks and I make a lot of prints. And I see that as something I want to keep going with, because I really love making, you know, little shapes, abstract shapes out of linoleum. And then printing with it. I have a little Woodzilla hand press, and I do a lot of hand printing, so it's fun.
Well, I just bought myself a jelly print pad to do monoprints, and I don't really know how to use it yet, and the first time I tried it, the paint stuck and didn't work out. I have a couple that I like, but I'm going to work with a friend who really knows how to do it. So that, and then I've started using paper with acrylic, so doing kind of a mixed media with collage and acrylic. So I want to do more of that. And I look at the big paintings out here and I think, ooh, I want to do a big painting. So I think the biggest one I've done is about like that, just one. I haven't done many big paintings,
So my practice is primarily painting now. I do teach collage classes. I really love exploring the way that colors interact. And when you paint abstractly, you have full control over the colors and the shapes that you're using. They don't have to look like something that exists already. So my last series of paintings were all very bright, bold colors, red and turquoise. And now I'm working on a series of paintings that are almost entirely white, kind of inspired by Anne Truitt and Barnett Newman, some of those painters who used white on white. And I've been just playing with the way I can use different tones of white to create compositions. This was all before Pantone picked white as its color of the year, which didn't go over well. But I've been making these now for several months, so we'll see where that leads.
For now, I think I'm going to stick to drawing, painting, and maybe printing, because that's very connected to drawing and painting.
I would like to continue developing what I do, and I would love to do something like designing the interior of a restaurant with some of my pieces, doing assemblage work.